Hello, and welcome back to the 5 Elements podcast, the podcast that is really about values and family values. And that's why our sponsors are always near and dear to our heart. And it's with that, I'd like to segue to today's sponsor, which is corporate lobbying. And I think when we talk about the heroes of our society, we like to talk about firefighters. We like to talk about first responders, nurses, frontline workers. But the heroes that we often ignore are the ones who are behind the scenes, orchestrating everything to go in the way that we truly to our core would like it to go. And that is corporate lobbyists. Now, without corporate lobbyists, the government would basically pass laws and regulations and limitations based off of their best evidence and based off of what is best for the people. And if you're listening to this podcast, I put air quotations there because, well, I don't really know why I did that, but it does make it seem as if they're not legitimate. And you know what? To be honest, they're not. Like, interests and people and everything in between, who knows better of what we want deep in our souls than corporations? They have our data. You know what? We like to say things. We like to say, you know what? I want to eat healthy, but we don't. We want to eat Doritos. We want to eat Taco Bell with shells made of Doritos. That's what's in our souls. And corporate lobbyists are the ones who make that possible. Like, when I was 12, I wanted to get drunk. And you know who was fighting for that? Lobbyists for the alcohol industry. And you know who didn't allow me to go into a liquor store and buy any amount of alcohol that I wanted when I was 12 and I knew what I wanted? It was the government. And this is why we need to really support lobbyists. We need to support their goals because their goals align with ours. And they have no other goals. They have no other goals than making us happy. And anyone who tells you anything else is a liar. And it's for that reason that I think we need to pay more respects and pay more homage to the heroes behind the scenes, pulling the strings of us mere puppets. And that's what we are. And that's corporate lobbyists. So next time your government passes a law, say they make cigarettes illegal to children, don't email your politician. Well, if you're going to email your politician, email them and say, hey, which lobbyists should I email? Because I want to cut out the middleman that is the politician. I want to talk directly to the lobbyists at Philip Morris International. And I want to say, hey, how can we right this wrong that our government has imposed on our freedoms, our civil liberties for life, happiness, and the pursuit of illicit drugs at any age? And it's with that I just want to give a big shout out to the corporate lobbyists who, you know what, they might not get the credit that they deserve, but the listeners of this podcast, you, me, not the sheeple, the people, we know that the real heroes are the shareholders, the landlords, and the corporate lobbyists. So with that out of the way, let's get to today's actual episode. And this is going to be my first real solo episode. I am raw dogging this, just me. I did write some notes because I do prepare a little bit, but I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous because usually I got someone to bounce off of, riff off of. I am just no helmet raw dogging this, and we're going to see how it goes. First off, if you want to actually support the podcast in a non-satirical way, you can sign up for online coaching, which is really what I offer best. It is the best service that I offer. I do online coaching for folks. I also do in-person training, but that is more of a Toronto-specific thing to one area. Where I can help most people best is through online coaching. So that comes with customized nutrition and training programming that would be delivered to an app that you would have. This can geared towards body composition, improving it, building muscle, losing fat. And the one thing I will always say there, I do this in a very sustainable way. It's very collaborative. I want you to be able to sustain the habits that help you reach your goals long term. So if you're just looking for the next fad diet, you're looking for someone to guide you into the next crash diet approach, I'm probably not your guy. But if you want to build habits that last indefinitely and build the skills and confidence in the gym to get hella strong, feel your best, and improve your body composition, then that is something I can help with. And you can check that out with the link in the show notes. You can see what I offer with online coaching, and you can sign up for a complimentary call to see if that's something that you're interested in and see if we work together first, right? Because you know what, you might have the funds to do it, the desire to do it and everything, but then we just don't vibe well. And that's okay too. But a free call, there's nothing really wrong with that. And from there, you can see if it's going to be a good vibe, and we'll go from there. Next way that you can support the show is by leaving a review and sharing the show. Now, as I said in the most recent email that I sent out on the newsletter, which you can sign up for with the link in the show notes, and yes, I will show myself at any opportunity that I can, because as I mentioned in my previous email, the executives at 5 Elements Coaching Incorporated have sent Tiny Tony my way. Tiny Tony is an ironic name. The man is large. The man is scary. Now, they said until I get the numbers of listeners to this podcast and the reviews up, he will be heading my way. And he said he was going to quote unquote end me. I don't really know what that means, but I am scared. And the sick thing that these executives did, and you know what? I'm not one to bash the shareholders and the executives, but at 5 Elements Coaching Incorporated specifically, they're quite malicious. And what they did, they said, Tiny Tony is on his way to your condo in the next 7 days. Here is a link where you can track his destination among his journey to basically come and end me. And so I just get to watch the clock tick down until the numbers get up. So you can actually help me by sharing this podcast and leaving a review if you haven't already. And with that out of the way, I think it's time to get to roses and thorns. Now, I'm going to start with the thorn because the rose segues into today's episode. Now, the thorn, first of all, that I've realized recently is I have a pretty large fear in asking for help, although I'm a huge proponent in asking for support. It's a bit of a conundrum. It's a bit ironic. I think and I hope I'm using those words correctly. Sometimes I just say big words to sound smart. And with that, I realized that in times of my own need, I have a really hard time asking for support. And every time I do and I make that courageous step, I realize how valuable it is because I feel 10 times better. You know, there's been some stuff that I've been struggling with lately, and I was just kind of suffering alone. And when I finally had talked to people in my life and bounced ideas off and shared frustrations and shared my own fears, I was like, dude, this stuff works. And what's funny about that is I talk about it all the time. And I'm someone who I would say is really good at being there for people and reminding people that, hey, I'm here. It's really important that you reach out. I love being supportive. I just really struggle with being supported. And giving that it's something that I preach so heavily, I felt a little bit like a hypocrite. I don't think I am one. I think it's just one of those things that I need to continuously work on. And it's not black and white. I don't think you ever quote unquote make it, but you do want to get better at it. And you get better when you are humbled. And I was humbled recently, and that was a thorn, bit of a rosy thorn, but it's definitely one where I realized I need to be able to ask for help better. And I need to understand my own limitations. And it's something that I tell people all the time, but I struggle with it myself. Now, the rose is that my training is going fantastic lately. I am training in a different way than I typically have. I am loving my lifting, but I'm not doing a ton of it. I'm doing 3 to 4 times a week, but my volume is relatively low. I generally do 4 exercises. I try to train them hard, and some weeks I only get it in twice. Some weeks I only get it in once. There was a week recently where I only got it in once. And the beauty of that, the rosiest rose of this entire situation is that the weeks where I only get it once or twice, it doesn't bother me. It's just like, hey man, that happened. Cool. And that's a place that I never thought I'd be when it comes to my own fitness. And I'm quite stoked on that. And I'm training for, and by the time this episode comes out, I will have been done this, but I am training for a sprint triathlon, a very small one. I'm doing with 2 of my clients in the city, and they signed up for it. And I was like, you know what, let's do it. What's really awesome after is, so this client is a married couple. They're both from India, but one's more from on the border of India and Nepal. And they said, I said I'd never had Nepalese food or Nepali food. I don't know which one they call it, but they're like, hey, after we do the triathlon, let's go grab some of the best Nepali food in the city. I'm like, hell yeah. So something that I really like to do is experience new food cultures in the city, especially South Asian ones, because my family is part of South Asia. Like, they are Goan, which is a very specific region in India. If anyone is from India listening to this, they'll know Goa is a kind of a weird spot. Majority Catholic, wasn't colonized by the Brits. Bit of a strange spot, but it is Indian. But the food is a little different at the same time too. So I've really enjoyed learning new cuisines and tasting new cuisines in South Asia, whether it be North Indian food, Pakistani food, Mali food in the South. I want to try some Sri Lankan food too. And in the city of Toronto, there is a ton of options, but Nepali food is something I've never tried. And that's at the end of that. So it's a nice bonding experience with a couple of my clients. It's something I haven't ever really done before in being a sprint triathlon, because I generally don't like doing cardio. But over the last little while, one of the things that I'm very proud of in this part of this rose is that I've started to love doing more cardio. Now, I don't do a ton of it, but I do more than I ever have in my life. And I always struggle with being someone who hated it. And I really took the incremental approach, like running 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time, because it wasn't a physical limitation that was keeping me back. It was a bit more psychological and mental, and building up that resilience has helped me quite a bit. And that's the big rose. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed in this sprint triathlon, I just picked skin off my nail. It's going to hurt for like a week. One of the things that I really enjoy with the sprint triathlon is that I've been doing more swimming and training it. And learning a new skill is always very exciting for me. It's something that when I do learn a new skill, I'm one of those annoying people who won't shut the hell up about it. Anyone who's been close to me for the last year while I've tried to learn Spanish is fully aware of my fixation on new skills and the fact that I'll just yap about it. Now with swimming, I've enjoyed learning the skill of swimming, because before I could just jump into water and swim whatever, but actually practicing swimming, I realized the mechanics of it, and I've gained a ton of respect for anyone who actually can swim well, because every time I've gone in the pool at the gym that I go to, I just watch the good swimmers and am amazed by it. Where before I wouldn't have appreciated it because I never really tried to swim before. And that's actually going to segue into today's episode, because today's episode is about my complicated, lifelong love-hate relationship with fitness and with training in particular. Now, I kind of want to backtrack this to the story of my fitness journey, because I've written about it a little bit, but I haven't gone deep on it. And I wanted to do that today. I wanted to tell the story because from a trainer's perspective, I think it can be very helpful for anyone who is not a trainer, not a fitness professional, and not particularly like obsessed with the gym, to know that someone like myself, who's been a trainer for 11 years now, and I've been working out since I was 14. So I guess 16 years I've been training, and I've been an athlete my whole life. Like even before I started working out, I played soccer competitively. I played football competitively. I played house league hockey, and I failed to make it competitively, but I still loved playing hockey, and I played a ton of sports, and I was really good at them. I could pick them up quite well, and I loved them. And even amongst all that, with all that in my favor, I have had a very complicated, oftentimes painful, and polar relationship with training. There are times where I've loved it to a sickening degree where I'm almost obsessed with it. And there's times where I hate it. And I've balanced that while actually working in the industry. And the times when I hate it the most, those are the hardest times to wake up and coach people, because you feel like a fraud. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it is something to manage when it becomes your livelihood, especially when you turn your passion into your livelihood. I'm glad that I did. But I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, because it does complicate that passion. Where I used to go to the gym to that was like my space where I would take my mind off things, and I loved the gym. But now there's none of that anymore, because the gym, I've lived in gyms for 12 years. It is not a rejuvenating space to me, and I've accepted that, and I've made peace with it and made the best situation that I can with that along the way. But I want to start off with how I got into training. And to start off where I got into training, it really started, or the prequel to my training saga was when in the summer going into grade 3, I had gained a lot of weight. I tell the story as that's when I discovered Lay's potato chips and Mark Messier's marketing campaign. Side note, in Sweden, I don't know if it's still this case, but historically it's been illegal to market to children. This is evidence for why that should be the case. That motherfucker, Mark Messier, great hockey player, got me hooked on Lay's potato chips. The way he marketed, you can't just have one. I was a big hockey guy. And this is sick, I would actually eat Lay's potato chips and say, you can't just have one, and then pound the whole bag. Now, the product itself was the thing that was hyper sensational about it that made me want to pound the whole bag. But goddamn, that marketing was so effective. And so much marketing is directed directly at kids, which is terrifying. And it worked on me. Like, I remember vividly being obsessed with Lay's potato chips because they gave me something that I really wasn't getting. They were comforting me, and food has always been the thing that comforts me deeply. And I was a kid, I was very alone. I had a lot of friends, but I mean, I've talked about this before, and my family is quite understanding that we talk about this stuff. My family home was a lonely one. It was a deeply lonely one. It was very fractured, or like middle class. Like, we made decent money. Like, we lived in a pretty nice house, but it was a lonely house where there was just no connection. And I think I craved for some level of connection to make me feel that love inside that I was lacking. And food became my drug of choice. And everyone has their vice, everyone has their drug of choice that just hits different. For some reason, with me, it's food. I've binge drank a lot, I've partied, I've done other stuff. Nothing has even come close to the level of comfort that food has given me. I've never actually gotten into hard drugs. And I think, and I said this to one of my friends the other day, I was like, I think one of the reasons is I don't think it would hit as hard as food, in all honesty, like where my binge eating issues came from. If you said you could never drink alcohol again, and don't get me wrong, I'm a guy who likes to get after it. I would easily be like, oh, we'll give up alcohol before I give up pizza for the rest of my life. No doubt. That's changed a little bit, but throughout my whole life, that's really been the case. And for some reason, the first time I started eating a lot of processed foods and delicious foods at times as a coping mechanism where, in other periods of time, someone might drink, someone might smoke, someone might do drugs, something to take the edge off. Food always did that for me. And that summer was the summer where that really took hold and my access to these foods increased. So I remember there was always potato chips in the house. So potato chips became a thing, baked potatoes, fried potatoes, anything that was a fried potato, I was just all about it. And I gained like 30 pounds, I think, that summer, which on a grade 2 body is quite a bit. And I remember I entered grade 3 as a fat kid. And it was weird because I was still quite athletic. I was still popular and whatever. But I went from grade 2 being a very thin kid, just over that summer ballooned up. And then that informed the next 5 years of my life where I was, quote unquote, a fat kid. And I carried so much body shame about it, especially living in this culture where fat phobia is rampant. It's less rampant now than ever. But when I was growing up, and this would have been 2005, 2006, God damn, it was super normal to just openly shame and judge fat people. And the comment was always the thing that I just would occupy my mind. Like, it's one of the reasons I do my best to never comment on people's bodies or comment on what they're eating, because I know personally how devastating that comment can be, especially as having lived in a fat body. Eating a lot and doing that publicly in a fat body is a terrifying thing, because there might be times where you're eating as much as everyone else, but you have this paranoia that everyone's eyes are on you. And sometimes they just are, because people really do like to judge fat people. And I myself have participated in that. So I'm no innocent victim in this situation, because I've lived in a fat body. But even while I was in a fat body, someone in a fatter body, I was definitely judgmental of. It's like, well, at least I'm not that person, which is not a healthy thought. It's just, I'm being honest here. And when it came to those 5 years where I really lived in a bigger body, I was obsessed with hiding it. But ironically, at the same time, my main coping mechanism was food. And that's being stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I didn't have other healthy coping mechanisms. In that time period, my parents got divorced. That was actually probably for the best, which I know is a strange thing to say, but our family home was so cold before that when my dad had moved out, I got a better relationship with my dad and a slightly better relationship with my mom. But I've talked about before, my relationship with my mom was always quite bastardized, because there was a time where I was a big mama's boy. We had a very enmeshed, codependent relationship, but healthy coping mechanisms were not displayed to me anywhere. My dad had a drinking problem. My mom had very deep, strong narcissistic tendencies and basically allergic to any sort of criticism. And between both of them, I didn't really experience what it's like to watch someone deal with stress in a healthy way and deal with problems in a healthy way. And you know what? My drug of choice just became food. It became the thing that always soothed me. Even in times where I was drinking a lot and partying a lot, it was the food that was the thing I would think about a lot. And considering I really wanted to lose weight because I was sick of living in a fatter body and sick of hating myself, sick of being ashamed of myself, I couldn't stop going back to food as my main coping mechanism. Now, when this really changed was, I believe it was grade 8. No, it was grade 8. I went on my second attempt of a diet. Now, that is too young to go on a diet. This wasn't an attempt to become healthier. This wasn't an attempt to introduce exercise and improve our family home eating. We never ate meals together, so this was a bit challenging. Like, I did write an article about this, And I tell this to people, there is not one time in my entire life that I can recall. So maybe when I was 3, my mother, my father, my sibling, and I sat down at our dinner table and ate a home cooked meal together. That never once happened. Now, we did it with McDonald's, but my dad was usually not there. So it was just me, my mom, and my sibling. And my mom usually wouldn't get anything either. So there was no sharing of meals. There was no home cooked meals. It was generally, I would just have pizza pockets or something frozen. And this was pretty typical back then, I think, for a lot of folks. But with that, it was hard to make healthier choices because there just wasn't really access to it. But I remember in grade 8, my mom decided to support me on this. And she bought me these like whey protein shakes that were, it was like isogenics. If anyone knows about that, it's kind of a pyramid scheme. Not kind of, it is one. But they're just essentially whey shakes. And I would just have a breakfast smoothie and a breakfast lunch. And I was eating generally healthy stuff, yogurt, granola. I was having like healthier options than what would typically be like me having 6 granola bars for dinner and then just going out and playing, or like just boxed wings and a frozen pizza for dinner and then doing whatever. I was just having more nutrient dense meals, smaller meals, and I started exercising a ton. Now, I was 13 when I started doing this. I was at this point about 180 pounds and 5'2", 5'3", I believe, when this all started. I did get taller throughout this all because it was a longer period, but by the end, I had lost 60 pounds in the summer going into grade 9, so going into high school. I think I also did feel some pressure going into high school that I didn't want to be, quote unquote, the fat kid in high school. And changing from elementary school to high school is a period of time where you transition into a different social situation. And I was like, you know what? I was really popular at the school I went to. I was cool. I played sports. But I was like, you know what? It's probably going to be harder to be a fat kid in high school than it was in elementary school, at least for me, because I was already popular by the time I had gained weight. And not to say that being popular is everything, but I think every kid wants to be accepted, at least the average kid does. And that was part of my probably internal assessment before I realized what actually had happened. Now, I lost 60 pounds eating what I thought was clean to an obsessive degree, and training up to 3 to 4 days a week. Now, when I 3 to 4 times a day, correct myself. And this is where it was very unhealthy. Now, what got me into training was, you might recall a movie. You might not, because it was a dog shit movie, but it's hilarious to rewatch as an adult. And it was called Never Back Down. It's actually such a funny movie to think about, because it's in that period where they were flaunting out 25-year-old men and saying, hey, these are 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds in high school. And anyone in my generation, millennials, we probably have a very distorted perception of what high school boys and girls were like, because we just watched shows where they were men and women, like straight up. These were adults. And in this movie, all the guys were jacked and like 25. And I remember going to high school and being like, Dad, that's what the grade 12s look like. And literally none of them looked like this. Like, we're kids. And in this movie, hilariously, this incredibly handsome, jacked man moves to a new school and isn't popular. That wouldn't happen. And there's another guy who's like the big dog of the school, and they kind of bullies him, but then it turns into, they have this fight club. He goes to a party, he gets his ass kicked. And then this guy goes and trains with this like African guy who lives in his gym, and he trains him how to fight, but for self-defense, not realizing that he's actually just training him for these stupid like UFC style house parties that they have where they just have fight clubs. I don't know. Insane movie, especially to watch as an adult, because you just realize it's just kids beating the living shit out of each other for like petty high school beef drama. And they're all like really upper class, like rich kids too in California, except for the main character. I don't know why. He just is poor, but goes to this really rich school. Now, in the movie, there's a legendary training montage. And anyone who loves, any meathead loves a good training montage. And I remember being like, dude, I am never back down. I will never back down. I'm going to get into shape. Finally, I'm going to do this. And I remember this would inform my training by this point, because in the montage, the main character was doing a bunch of pull-ups. And I was like, I can't do a pull-up. I'm going to do a fucking pull-up. And I became obsessed with doing a pull-up. Now, at this time, my uncle and my aunt who live in Mississauga, we visited them around this time, and they had this hanging chin-up bar in their basement. And I remember I looked at it, I grabbed it, I tried to pull myself up, and I couldn't move. And I remember being like, okay, when I get back home, when I get back to London, training begins. I'm going to do a pull-up. Now, I didn't have a pull-up bar at my house in London, but what we did have, we had a tree on our front lawn with a slightly above parallel angled branch that could withhold my body weight. And that's where I started. I started just hanging on that, trying to do angled pull-ups. This little chubby brown kid, just no idea what I'm doing, but just pulling on this tree, trying to move, failing at it repeatedly until I remember my mom, she brought home one of those chin-up bars that you stick in the doorway. And she's like, no more doing pull-ups in the front yard on the tree. You look insane. Just do them downstairs. And that was really what started me training. So I had this routine that I would do 3 to 4 times a day. And I was a big skater at this time too. So when it really ramped up, when I was, the moment I'd wake up before school and I would do it, then I'd go to school. You know, school's all about playing or whatever. And then I get home from school and I do this workout. I would skateboard all night. I started losing weight because I was eating a little bit healthier, right? I was adopting what I figured out was a clean diet. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I started really developing some of the unhealthy ideas around nutrition from a rigid perspective that I've been basically working to get rid of for the last 10 years. This is good. This is bad. None of this, none of that, cheat days, all of that stuff. But this is where this started to formulate. And then by the time summer hit, I already lost like 20 pounds, probably going into the summer in between grade 8 and 9. And I was feeling really confident. I was feeling good. People kept commenting on how good I looked. And I talked about how much of an effect that had, because it made me feel so much validation in ways that I hadn't been getting ever in my life. I got a validation in other ways, like being an athlete. I was pretty smart. You know, I was a class clown. I was a funny guy. But I'd never been complimented on how I looked when I was a fat kid. No one had really said much. Now, people started commenting on my body all the time. And the thing is, it was less kids than anything. It was mostly adults. And this really taught me like, oh my God, I have so much value now that I've lost this weight. Like people keep telling me how good I look. And there were a lot of women that were like probably 30, 40 who went through some crazy diet culture eras of like just relentless pursuits for thinness. They were probably my biggest cheerleaders, and my mom being one of them. And I don't blame them for it, because that was the environment that we were in. And it did teach me a lot about having my self-worth be tied up in looking this way and looking thin, because the thinner I got, the more compliments I got. And heading into that summer, I doubled down on everything. And that's when it really became really unhealthy for me, I think. That was when I started upping it to 4 times a day of my training, because I could. I would wake up, do my routine, which was, you know, underhand pull-ups, neutral grip pull-ups, overhand pull-ups. You put the contraption on the floor. You do different types of push-ups. You do sit-ups. I started doing some HIIT, and then I would go out and skate all day, come back for lunch, eat lunch, do the same workout, go out and skate all day, come back in for dinner, eat my dinner, do my workout, go and skate all night. And then I'd come back in at the end of the night and I would probably do one before bed. I didn't always do one before bed, but that's when I would get my 4. And I was doing that all summer. And I think I lost another 30 or 40 pounds that summer, to the point that I got down to 120 pounds from what started at 180. So ironically, because I was doing so much pull-ups, no legs, I literally never trained legs other than skateboarding all the time, which isn't directly training legs, and like sprinting, which I started doing because I had read some article that HIIT has some sort of magic afterburn effect, and that was going to make me just melt fat off, right? This is the era of fitness that we're in at this time. And because I was doing only upper body and arms, I actually had pretty big biceps for now a skinny little like 120 pound kid, but I had like pipes because I could do 20 pull-ups in a row, and I would do like 3-4 sets of that. And I would do that repeatedly, like multiple times per day. I was doing so many pull-ups that I just grew these like muscular arms, but on beam pull frame at this point. So going into high school, that's when I started actually lifting weights. I remember my mom bought me a bench press, and I'm happy that she bought me this, but this is when I started lifting weights and doing bench press. It was good because now I was squatting. I was actually lifting weight as opposed to just doing pull-ups and push-ups all the time and neglecting my legs. And I started playing football, and everything was pretty good. I got really into fitness. I was still pretty stuck in my the way that I viewed about food. Like I was like cheat days. I would never eat those foods until I did. Like I do remember for lunch every day. And I do remember in grade 9, I just didn't bring a lunch. I lived with my my mom at the time, but we didn't really pack lunches at that time. I remember I just bring like 2 granola bars for the day, and I would just kind of figure that out with the 2 granola bars throughout the day. But I would train, and then I would have football practice, and I would come home, and that's when I would have dinner. Like we didn't really do meals. It was kind of fend for yourself situation. And that probably informed a lot of my ravenous eating behaviors, because I didn't really, for not being financially insecure, it was almost like a food insecure household, and it shouldn't have been. This was neglectful parenting 100%. And so when I got to eat, I would just like gorge myself. And I do think this is where some of my binge eating stuff started to happen. It probably started to happen when I first started losing weight, because I did set up cheat days, because someone had said somewhere that if you on a cheat day, you can eat whatever you want. It doesn't matter, because you've been dieting all week, and now your body will go into overdrive and burn all the calories. It was some pseudoscience bullshit that made me feel like I could have whatever. But fast forward into grade 9, when I'm doing this, I am really just fasting all day unintentionally, maybe a couple granola bars, and then just gorging whenever I could, whenever I got a chance when I got home. But I was like doing a lot of activity in between then. So I was hungry a lot of the time, and for no real economic reason. This shouldn't have been the issue. This shouldn't have actually been the case. But now that I think about it out loud, it was. So that was all good. But then I started smoking weed, I think in grade 10, end of grade 9, started grade 10. And that's when I started pounding on gaining a little bit of the weight back. And I've talked about this before with weight loss maintenance statistics, they can be quite grim. And I was falling into the statistic of gaining back weight. Now I'd gained a lot of muscle, but I'd gained back some fat repeatedly, and even more because I would smoke weed and I would munch. And that was just a thing that we did. And that definitely did not help. And it did not help with my binge eating patterns, because and this is how I always knew food was my drug of choice. If you said we're going to get high, I'd be like, okay, cool. If you said we're going to get high and like order a bunch of food, I'd be like, hell yeah. But if you said we're just going to order a bunch of food and not get high, I'd also be like, hell yeah. Like I was more in it for the food than anything, but I liked smoking weed because I just loved munching when I was high. So I gained back quite a bit of weight. Not all of it. I'd also gotten taller. I'd built a lot of muscle. So my body composition was different. But I started to have a lot of this shame about my body again, like old habits that I had when I was younger of hiding my physique whenever I could, only having a few outfits that I felt comfortable in because I didn't want to appear fat. And anyone who struggled with their weight and their body image probably knows what I'm talking about when you talk about the specific outfits that you have that you feel safe in, right? Right now, I have a lot of outfits that I feel safe in, probably because I am actually leaner than I've been in a long time and maintain that for a longer period of time. But I also have worked on some of my body image stuff at the same time. So it's a mix of both. But at this time, I was gaining back weight, feeling deeply insecure, didn't understand why I felt this way, but I was relying on old habits of like slouching a lot just to hide, because I actually store a decent amount of fat on my chest, so I would get man boobs, and that was my biggest insecurity. So I would develop like really round shoulders so that I could hide my chest fat, because I was petrified of someone making a comment about them. So with all that, I gained back some of the weight. I started hating the gym again, and this was the first time I had hated the gym ever, because up until this point, the gym was only associated with wins for me. It was awesome. It was, dude, I'm feeling good. I'm losing weight. People keep commenting how good I look, and I'm looking ways that I never have thought that I would, and I'm getting stronger in ways that I never thought. But now I'm getting back to gaining weight. And with that, it made me ashamed to go to the gym, because I would imagine what I would look like at my best in the gym. And I didn't want to show up because I didn't want to show up the way that I looked now. And it was all rooted in self-loathing and all rooted in like harmful body image issues. Right. And this is one of the first times I really hated the gym. And the ironic part is, if I wanted to get back the body composition that I had before, it would have to take place partially in the gym to build back the muscle. And, it looked the way that I wanted to look, but I then felt ashamed to go. And it's this double like hatred for the gym, because now I'm like, shit, this is what I need, but I'm too ashamed to go. And there's a lot of ironic effects of stigma on how they impact eating behaviors. Like, ironically, at the same time, if I am feeling ashamed of how I'm eating and then you comment on my eating, I'm actually more likely to eat more, because that's at the same time my eating coping mechanism is eating. So And there's some research of like how that a lot of people that tends to impact them too. It's one of the reasons why shaming just doesn't generally help for most people, because it's not that we double down, but if that's part of your coping mechanism, it's one of the ways that we'll cope with stress, which comes from shame. So I had a really weird relationship with training throughout high school because I liked it. I know I had to do it for football. I wanted to look a certain way, but then I was starting to basically go through my first periods of yo-yo dieting. And anyone who's known me for a long time, I mean, it's not an elephant in the room. It's very obvious that like I am a yo-yo dieter. My body changes quite a bit. I'm not attached to the way I look right now as if I'll always look this way. I do like how I look right now. I feel very confident. I feel very balanced, but it is an extension of me being happy, having the free time to do so, enjoying my training, having the energy. I've battled a lot of depression in my life, and depression makes it really hard to train. And when you have depression and then you have bad body image issues, the depression would impact how I looked, which would then make me have worse body image issues, which would feed into the depression. And it's a really dangerous cycle. But when you're in that cycle, the gym is a place you start to hate. And it was originally something that I loved. It made me feel so empowered, where like the first time I did a pull-up, I was like, I did it. Like I never thought I could do this. And I remember hanging from that pull-up bar being like, oh my God. And then I was determined, and now I'm doing 20 pull-ups for 4 sets, sometimes to an unhealthy degree, 4 times a day. Right. And that was a reminder of like, hey, I can do this. And now the gym was a reminder of the exact opposite, where it was like, oh my God, I lost everything. And I lost all my strength. I don't look the way I looked before. I feel so shitty. I had this contrast of how good it felt to look in a leaner body, especially accompanied with all of the social praise that you get. And I'm not advocating for the social praise. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it's a real thing. Now, I went through a big phase post high school. All right, this is kind of continues through high school, but I went through this big phase post high school where I loved the gym. And this was the period of time where I was obsessed with the gym. It was the thing that just like made the rest of the world disappear. And this is where my deep passion for the gym itself came. Before, it was an extension of kind of how you look. It was an extension of like helping with sports. It was an extension with yada, yada, yada. Now at this period of time, I'm about 19 years old. I'm 18. The gym is everything. I am going to bed envisioning what my next workout's going to look like, right? I am thinking about it all the time. Like the moment my workout finishes, I'm like, what am I going to do next? Like I can't wait till my next workout. I was a true meathead. And it's at about this time I started working at Good Life as a personal trainer. Like I remember saying to my mom one time, my dream in life is to work at a gym. And keep in mind, the minimum wage at this time was like $7 an hour. But I said, honestly, Mom, if I could just make $15 an hour and work at a gym, I could do that for the rest of my life, which is insane. But you know what? To her credit, she's like, okay, I support you. And that's one thing that I do always give my mom credit for. She was supportive in those realms. It toggled between indifference and support, but regardless, she gave me space to do what I really wanted to do. So I remember I started working at that Good Life because they just offered me the job. They saw that I was there all the time. They saw I was passionate about it. And I remember I thought you needed a kin degree. You don't. The barrier to entry to becoming a personal trainer is hilariously low. But I'm glad that I got in because you know what? I didn't have the degree, but after 12 years, I've learned so much and I applied myself. But for a lot of people, because the barrier to entry is so low, they just come in, they leave because they don't take it very seriously. Understandably so, because it's not for everyone. But at this point, I'm obsessed with the gym. I'm feeling really good. I now have turned it into my career and it's all I think about is how I talk about. But at the same time, because I started first working again, I started having a lot of stress. And one of my coping mechanisms is eating. Now I'm in a role of authority. I'm supposed to look a certain way. I am a trainer. And I started gaining weight. The way I looked when I first started at Good Life, 6 months in, I had gained a decent amount of weight and I felt so insecure about it. So the body image issues I had were compounded by the fact that my role, my expertise was attached to how I look, or at least my perceived expertise. I don't believe to be a trainer, you need to be in great shape. I truly don't believe that. I think you need to be a great coach. You need to have good expertise. You need to connect with people and you should care about your own fitness, right? You shouldn't just never work out and not care about it. I don't know if that's great because it does. What I will say is as a coach, when you're training consistently, you are reminded of the empathy of what it's like to go through tough workouts. And there was a period where I didn't train much at all, and I did become a worse coach because kind of forgot how hard it is to train and also how rewarding it is. It just became too clinical, where I was like, yep, this is what you do, is you got to do. And I was less relatable as a coach and less probably inspiring because I just wasn't fired up about working out at all. But now that I had this role and I started gaining weight again, God, it made training very complicated for me because I felt so much shame about being quote unquote now a fat trainer. And I wasn't in what socially you would consider a fat body. Like I wouldn't be fat shamed probably, but I would for a trainer at this point. And that was deeply challenging as a coach because I was like 19 at the time too. So I didn't have like dynamic ways of thinking and a nuanced perspective on anything. It was just, wow, dude, I can't be a fat trainer. But then one of the stresses and mechanisms that I had for managing my stress was through eating. So the cycle just continuously repeats itself. So this kind of continues. I went through waves of it, et cetera, et cetera. And I basically went through waves of this, a love-hate relationship, the entire duration of my career of training, which is about 11 years long. The whole time. There would be periods where I'd be training and loving it and feeling great. And then there'd be periods where I would hate it. And those periods were extremely tough because there were periods where I was battling depression, and I battled depression throughout my entire 20s sporadically. And I'm a pretty happy guy at baseline, but that doesn't mean you don't struggle with depression. And I wasn't aware that I was struggling with it. To tie back into my thorn today, I, at this point, sought no support from anyone. I really white knuckled it the whole time. I've always had a trouble with letting people in. So no one really knew. I think people closest to me could tell during the tough times, but I would basically just disappear. I would other side it, as I've said to someone who's close to me that they do the same thing, where it's like, yeah, I'll see you on the other side when I feel good again. And I did this repeatedly for so long, but during the whole time I still had to show up and motivate clients. And that was fucking tough. I will say that. I think I was still a decent coach during that time, but goddamn was that fucking hard because I wasn't training at all during some of these periods. I was binge eating and I felt nothing but shame and like a fraud, like a liar when I would show up and coach my clients in the exact opposite stuff. So when I say that a lot of my coaching comes from empathy, I do mean that. I've struggled with this stuff for such a long time that I get what a lot of people go through when they go through the ups and downs of training. Now, I'll say this continues on until, I don't know, now. Because the problem I would go through is that when I would, because so much of my value and like self-identity and self-worth was attached to how I looked, and it was like this positive feedback loop or is this negative feedback loop. So what would happen is I would start losing weight. I would feel really confident. I would love training, and then that would feed itself. I would love training, so I'd get even more improved body composition. I would feel even better about myself. And I would go through this cycle. And I remember I'd start wearing old clothes again. I'd feel more confident. I'd want to go out. I want to socialize. I want to do all these things because I felt better. But then, because I would crash diet so hard and I would like go so into it, I would start to rebound and I would gain weight back. Now, because I had this all or nothing mentality, this black and white level of thinking, when I started a binge, like the first time I would be dieting, I wouldn't really binge the whole time. And eventually I would binge. And you know what? There was a few times where I did it once and it wasn't a big deal. But the way it always worked for me is that it would basically snowball when I had gained the weight back. So I remember one period I was at Equinox. This was maybe the leanest I had ever gotten. I felt so fucking good. Like it was like in Limitless when he takes NZT, I think it's called, and the color tones of the planet go from gray to sepia. And that's how I felt during this period because of so much value of my internal value was tied in me looking a certain way. And then when I looked that way, I trained harder. Like everything was just kind of going good for me at this period of time. And I remember I had one binge and I was like, oh, you know, it's cool. It's fine. And then I went back to normal. And now, that was honestly huge for me because I was like, whoa, it doesn't have to be this whole thing. Now that turned into 2, that turned into 3. And then I basically spent 3 months gaining back all of the weight that I lost. And during that period, I started hating the gym again. And this, keep in mind, I'm still a trainer and I'm like a pretty respected trainer. one of the highest level trainers you can be at this gym downtown Toronto. I have this level of perceived authority. I know my shit. There's a lot of things going well, and I'm masking this deep hatred that I have for my body, and now the deep hatred I have for the gym. And then it starts this spiral of binging. And this was actually the worst period of binging I've ever had in my life, where for like 3-4 months, I lived for the weekend and I didn't do anything on the weekend, but I would just like, this is when I would call Uber Eats I would basically come home from work on a Friday, call Uber Eats, order it, but while I'm eating it on Uber Eats, again, ordering more. And I would just eat and watch movies and fucking disassociate from this planet, right? If I could have put a burger in a syringe and inject it in my veins and pass out, I fucking would have. But instead of like my drug of choice was just food. So I would just eat and eat and eat. And I'd do that all weekend to the point that I would get the Sunday scaries of like, oh my God, I can't go in the gym tomorrow. Like, because this stuff always comes with a level of body dysmorphia where, you know, when you overeat, you're like, oh my God, I feel fatter. It's like you haven't gained any belly fat to a meaningful degree on one weekend. But I would feel it, and then I would feel so much shame. And what would spiral is I would often go back into work that week, and I would restrict for the first 3 days, right? I might work out, I might not, but I would restrict as much as I could. And then I'd set myself up again for the weekend because I'd go into Fridays hungry as fuck, and then just blackout curtains, which I did have, and just eat all weekend. Or I would drink, but if I drank, I usually ate too. And it was just kind of this cycle for a long period of time. And I gained basically all the weight back. And keep in mind, like I was so fat phobic that me gaining all the weight back was kind of me just in a slightly chubby body with like pretty muscular arms and an upper body. And I've always had quite big legs too. So, I mean, this was by no means a marginalized body. Like where I would be this depressed was not me living in such a large body that I was getting nothing but social stigma everywhere I went. I'd probably just been like, oh, that guy works out. I would have had basically a dad bod at this point, and not like the bullshit dad bod where people they've never lifted, they have a belly. No, I had like big arms, like decently big arms and shoulder. Like you could tell that I worked out and I just wasn't lean essentially. And that's how fat phobic I was, that would send me into a deep spiral of depression. And these are all symptoms of basically the larger issue, which was depression for me at the time. And my main coping mechanism was food. And I know I've said that 100 times, but it just truly was. Now, this continued essentially. And the moment I started to actually challenge it was when I started to understand that I had a binge eating disorder. I don't want to say disorder, but I disordered eating with binge eating being my weapon of choice. And this was like 5 years ago. This was right before the pandemic. And I started to realize, oh my God, I started talking about it, and I never talked about it before. And the amount of power that I got back from talking about it was inspiring to me. Like I really felt like, oh my God, this time might be different. It wasn't, but it was progress because I did start to talk about it. And I'll be honest, I haven't really binged to the degree that I used to before since I started talking about it. I've definitely like had mini binges, and I've definitely like really overate, but it's almost like I'm consciously aware of it, and I don't tell myself the same story. It's not, okay, tomorrow starting fresh, never going to happen again. It's fuck, I did it. Like, and it's usually not as bad, and it's not eating Uber Eats while on Uber Eats looking for more and then going down to because what I used to do, I would get the second Uber Eats and then I'd go down to Rabba, which was underneath my old condo. And you know, I'd be like, this is a weird thing that I've talked about a couple of people with, but sometimes with binge eating, especially if you're in like a fitness mind, you'll like binge eat on like quote unquote healthier things. So it'd be like Harvest Snaps, sweet potato chips, protein bars, things that I'm convincing myself are healthy, but they're not really any healthier, especially when you have an entire bag and 4 bars. Like 3 things of Halo Top. Like that kind of defeats the purpose of having the Halo Top, right? So I would do that kind of stuff. Now I haven't done that in a long time. Like I can't even recall last time, but I've definitely like binged where I like really overate, but it's less delusional in my mind of like, oh my God, tomorrow is never going to happen again. This is my last time. This is my last supper. It's just, oh shit. I really overate intentionally here because I was just trying to like turn the fucking world off. Now, I think if you've never struggled with binge eating to an unhealthy degree, that just probably feels like overeating and overindulging. I think it's a little more challenging when you have the history of it because it's like, oh shit, am I falling back into old habits? Who knows? It could just be a real overindulgence, but it could teeter in on a binge because of my history with it. I'm not really sure about this kind of stuff. For myself, at least, because I'll overanalyze it. But then I started really getting into like body neutrality and challenging my internal level of like fat phobia, trying to develop fitness outside of body image. And that's one of the reasons that I really took the chance to write that article for Precision Nutrition when the woman who hired me or contracted me, she gave me the idea, and I said, oh my God, I would love to talk about that because it's something that I've been actively working on. So I wasn't lying when I wrote that article. It's something that I truly have been working on myself. And I remember starting to focus on like strength goals for the sake of strength. And I'd done it a little bit before, but not to this degree. Like first time I had benched 300 pounds, I had squatted over 415, and I was feeling fucking good. And here's the thing, I wasn't lean. I was thick, muscular, and strong. And I will not be delusional and say I loved my body, but I wasn't depressed and I didn't hate it. And I started eating a lot of foods in moderation that I never could have before. I think I overdid it, I'll be honest. And that was okay. That was a part of my journey. Like I was having one, for example, you remember if you followed me on Instagram at the time, I'd basically have half a box of cereal with 2 scoops of protein every day for breakfast. And I'd post it because I was like, I was allowing myself to have foods that I never could before. Now, I did start relying on this too much to the point that I started like eating way too little of healthy foods and just probably eating too much. But in general, it was a healing period for me where I was like, hey man, like it was the first time in my life where I was thicker and I wasn't trying to lose weight and I loved training and I was eating what I, in my mind, had deemed unhealthy foods in a moderately balanced way, right? I can eat a lot and my metabolism is pretty high. So, your boy was eating, but I wasn't feeling the same level of guilt and shame about it. I do think I was overeating it. I was eating more than I needed at the time. And I think that was all part of the journey, to be honest. So I got thick doing this. And this is actually after I did a cut and I gained a lot of weight back. And I remember the weight gain itself didn't send me into a depression, which honestly, that's a huge win because I gained quite a bit of weight. I gained a lot of muscle, but at the same time, I gained a lot of fat and it didn't send me into depression. And I never stopped training. It's the first time I'd ever done this. Now, that really did get sidetracked during there was 1 year period towards the end of my last relationship. Anyone who knows me personally, it was a very fraught time. But since that relationship had ended a while ago, right, that's where I started to really work on my relationship with exercise in a more dynamic way because I was just very busy. There was a period when I was living in Mississauga and I was driving to Toronto to work from Mississauga. I was getting these 30-minute workouts in and I started to become okay with it. And then by the time I moved back to my condo in Toronto, I basically was struggling with my energy levels to a pretty big degree. And before, when I would struggle with that, I just wouldn't train. And that's when I started, and you may have seen this on my Instagram page, like band workouts. That's when I started really doing those, like 3 times a week, maybe do 4 exercises. Like I was kind of going against what I deemed optimal because I was like, I just can't get it in. And there was no body composition attached to any of these workouts. I just really wanted to repair my relationship with exercise. And I did that to a decent degree over the last year, where this is probably the most consistent I've trained without it always being attached to a body image. Like even when I'm eating a little bit more and not caring about anything, I'm still training. And even when I was getting leaner or building muscle or whatever, I was still training. I was for the first time in my life, I really feel like I trained just for the sake of training half the time. Don't get me wrong. I have lost a little bit of body fat in the last while. I'm actually looking decently lean and feeling real strong in a way that I haven't maybe ever in such a balanced way. And that feels fucking sick. I'm not going to sit here and say that doesn't feel awesome. It does. But when I didn't look this way, I was still training. And I think the point of this episode is that was the ultimate end goal for me, is to get to there. Now it took 12 years, 14 years, maybe even 16, who knows? It's been a journey, and it's not going to be that way for everyone. But it will be this way for a lot of people, and I've seen it with a lot of people that I work out with, where when you attach fitness to an outcome that's aesthetic only, you basically put all of your stock into that. It makes managing a balanced life with fitness really fucking hard, because you don't train for anything other than looking a certain way. And when you don't look that way, you might carry shame that then extends itself to having you work out less. Ironically, it's the ironic effect of body stigma and weight stigma, where we end up doing the behaviors that we want to do for our goals even less because we feel so much shame. That can happen. Or on the opposite side, you might train excessively and eat in such an excessively clean way out of paranoid reasons, right? And that takes away your ability to live life. Now, for me, this took a really long time to run you through what this looks like for me now. Last week, I trained 4 times. I've been training for a mini triathlon, so I did some swimming. I did some new stuff, which was really cool, as I talked about. But on the weekend, me and one of my best friends, Hamza, shout out. I know he's okay with me saying his name on the pod. I took him out for his birthday, and his wife, Amna, joined us, and we fucking ate. And then I went out for drinks after with 2 of my other close friends. And then on Saturday, I woke up a little hungover. And normally when I would do that, I'd be like, oh my God, I blew my diet. I must have fucking had like 2,000 calories on Friday night. Like, we were eating good. We went to a nice restaurant. I was like, I don't care. I'm just having a fun meal. And I remember I got to the point where I could have just eaten never and not stopped, because Amna had joined us later and she had to order more food. I was like, I'm actually good. Where that would have never happened before, because I didn't have this scarcity in my mind of like, oh my God, this is the last time. Starting tomorrow, never again. But I didn't. What I did was I was like, I'm actually full, guys. Then I went out for drinks with some other friends, had even more drinks. I'm aware of the caloric intake of those drinks. We got some cocktails, which tend to be even more. And I didn't care, because there was a level of balance in my mind where I'm like, hey, this is me having fun with people I love. And then I woke up on Saturday. I still trained. Now, was my training session as good? No. But I can live in the gray now where I'm like, hey, man, there's a cost to, you know what, getting after it, having like 6-7 drinks on a night, which I don't love to do all the time. But now when I do them, it doesn't spiral, where before it used to. So I mixed all of that in 1 week where I trained hard. I also relaxed. I had some drinks with some friends. I went out for an insanely awesome dinner. I did a lot of things where if I tried to do that 8 years ago, I would have failed miserably. And it took me failing miserably repeatedly. And it took a lot of pain for me specifically. There were things I could have done along the journey that would have made it a lot better. And I do wish anyone who's going through that struggle right now has access to that, right? And I hope that, like, podcasts and stories like this and content and people sharing their stories, I think that if I heard this when I was 22, oh my God, it would have resonated deeply, because I would have been in the thick of it. Would that have changed the actual outcome immediately? No. But it does take hearing the same message packaged in a bunch of different ways to help support someone with change. It takes their own action too, but we don't change completely independently. And it took me listening to stories of other people and having the courage to talk about it. I'm someone who is actually quite public. I would share this stuff very publicly. Not everyone's like that, and that's okay. But for me, it's something I'm deeply comfortable with, because it really helps me formulate my thoughts. And it helps me to know that if someone hears this, it will help them. I mean, I don't care about, maybe some of it might seem embarrassing. For me, it's truly not. But if it helps them with that, that actually is something that I truly value. Because I've said before, I genuinely often make content that I wish my 21-year-old self consumed when it comes to fitness and health. And that's why I tend to get a little bit deeper on this stuff, because I didn't need to know how many sets I needed to do. But I needed to know that it's okay to have a couple beers on a Friday night and a burger, and it's not going to destroy your fitness goals. And that if you don't do any of that, that doesn't make you better than anyone else. It actually just genuinely makes you more miserable and judgmental. And it also is good to know about body neutrality and setting goals that have nothing to do with how you look, and questioning how much value you put in your self-worth based on how you look. And I still have that for sure. It doesn't go away. I think that's one of the delusions that people misassociate with attempting to be more body neutral. Like, I do care about how I look. I will not sit here and tell you that I don't. But I will say that I care a little bit less than I used to. And I can gain levels of self-worth in other ways, in ways that I couldn't before. And it's ironic to say that I've been a trainer for 12 years and I have had a hate-love relationship with fitness the entire fucking time. And I will probably continue to have that hate-love relationship for the rest of my life, but it's something that I want to keep in my life forever, because I know how good it makes me feel when I'm doing it consistently. On average, it makes me feel good. It does not always make me feel good. It's kind of similar to a relationship with a human. If you walk into a relationship with a human expecting that I will love this person always, and they will always make me happy, and I'll always make them happy, don't Disneyify. Disneyify? Fuck, I was cooking there. The Disneyification of relationships extends. There we go. Extends to fitness, interpersonal relationships, and kind of any relationship. And if you think it's going to be nothing but happily ever after, you're going to routinely be so frustrated when you hit the wall of reality that is, there will be days that you just fucking hate whatever it is. It could be someone you love. That it's like the sight of them, you're like, shut up, get away from me. I need a little time to decompress. Or I can't go to the gym right now. I don't have it in me. Or maybe if I go, I'm going for a half workout, and that's okay. If you live in that black and white and you live with these unrealistic expectations, even I think it's important to hear it from someone like me, where if you didn't know any of this story, you just maybe started listening to the podcast, you saw my Instagram, you're like, oh dude, like this guy seems like he really loves it. Like I generally do. But there are times when I really hate it and it's something I really struggle with. And I wanted to talk about that. So if it's something that you've been struggling with in terms of developing your relationship with exercise, take it from me, you need to have patience. And there also is no world where you just love it. Like even today, I delayed my workout by an hour, moved it around because I just didn't want to do it. And I did it. I didn't go as hard as I probably should have. I didn't have the energy, and I'm okay with that. And that happens sometimes. 2 days ago, I fucking got after it. Hey, that's how it goes. So that's kind of the story that I wanted to share. How complicated and messy a love-hate relationship with fitness is in general, when it comes from someone who is a perceived authority on fitness, a coach, a personal trainer, a quote-unquote expert, depending on however you view me. You might think I'm a dickhead. That's also cool. But I do gets down with the fitness. So, I mean, I hope that this helped you, and hope that if you're stuck in that position too, just know it's going to take a lot of time, and it's really important to be honest with yourself along the way and continuously question your motives and question, hey, is there too much of my value in the body image stuff? How am I looking at food? Am I living in this dichotomous way of food's good and bad? Do I allow myself to have the things that I really like? And if I deviate from this rigid plan, do I feel shame? Like, could I do this forever? That's really the question you got to keep asking yourself. Right now, I could do this forever, what I'm doing. Will I be an elite athlete if I do that? Probably not. Definitely not. Will I be happy and healthy, or happier than healthier than when I was before, when I looked at fitness in a really rigid way? 1,000,000%, yeah. So that's really where I'm going to cap it today. That's my story. That's 12 years of a hate-love relationship with fitness from the perspective of a fitness coach. And a shameless segue here is, if you're looking for online coaching and you have a complicated relationship with fitness and you want to develop habits and a perspective and a way to look at your fitness journey that is going to be sustainable long-term, I can definitely help you with that. Now, if it's coming from a place of just pure disordered eating, I can't help you with that. I could refer you out. But if you're stuck and you're like, I don't know how to achieve this balanced position where I'm still working towards my goals, but I need to challenge the way I'm thinking about food, the way I'm thinking about exercise, and I want to at the same time get stronger and more confident in my body, that is something I would love to help you with. So you can check out what I offer with online coaching in the link in the show notes. And I will see you next time. Cheers.